Hey, guess what? We're live. So finish your drink and be a damn it, Kellen.
Professional, Kellen.
Professional.
This is not some sort of Jimmy Fallon show. We're not supposed to be drinking before, during.
Wow,
right?
shots fired.
Shots fired.
I'm getting some echo.
Not some sort of Jimmy Fallon show.
Speaking of unprofessional, someone is playing the stream in the background.
I'm getting echo. I was going to say, is that you or is that me? It's like, what is going on?
Did you not mute YouTube, maybe?
Is that you or is that me? Oh, God, that is me. Shit.
Pretty sure it's you.
Excuse me.
I have earbuds in, so it's probably not me.
Well, I was so curious about it because I was like, wait a second, what's going on? There we go. Extremely professional show, folks. Extremely professional.
Nick Meyer's already like, screw the rules. Like whatever.
Again, Nick is such punk rock. I love it.
It's true. So, Kellen, it's been an interesting week.
Yeah. It's been a very interesting week. Tell me about your interesting week, Brad.
My interesting week. My kid is finally in school regularly again, which is nice. Even though this weekend lasted 5 days somehow, with the extra long weekend and then a snow day yesterday. So technically he's in school, but he's been home more than he's been in school the last 2 weeks. But weather and technicalities. What can you do?
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it's been pretty relaxing. I was snowed in yesterday, so I didn't get a whole lot done other than just hanging around the house.
But Brad, that says so much that where you live in the world getting snowed in, that says that there is so much fucking snow.
Oh, it was a disaster. In an emergency, I could have dug myself out, but sure. I didn't have anything important to do, so I didn't bother. But yeah, it was a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have it easy up here comparatively to some places because at least we're used to it.
It seems like, yes, here in Chicago, the snow continues to pile and pile and pile. It's a joke. It's going to snow tonight, and I'm going to walk outside in the morning, and I'm going to cry. But it's one of those situations where at least here in Chicago, we know how to handle the snow, right? I talked to my folks back in Oregon. They got 2 inches of snow. The entire state shut down. You talked to our friend Mitra in San Antonio, and it's Mad Max. No one knows what's going on. The only thing that matters is gasoline and bullets.
Yeah. The price of electricity went up like 1,000 times or 1,000% or whatever earlier today.
Insanity.
Crazy times.
Yes. Very strange. Very strange. But you know what? Nothing is stranger than the fact that Rush Limbaugh is now dead.
That's a little strange. One would think someone that evil would live forever.
That's exactly it, Brad. One would have thought that when you sold your soul, that would give you eternal life, but it turns out...
otherwise, what's the point?
What's the point?
Jeez. I do have a slight bone to pick with you, I gotta say, though.
Excuse me, Brad. I didn't realize we're getting into it immediately. Let's get in.
Immediately.
Okay.
Because I have it on very good authority, given that I listened to it, that you're cheating on me with a professionally produced audio podcast.
Now, Brad, people call this, between you and me, this is a podcast. This is not a podcast.
No.
This is a live talk show, right? This is the two of us having a conversation. It's not a podcast. This would not work as a podcast.
So you're saying, as far as cheating goes, streaming doesn't count?
No, Brad. Brad, you are my number one. You are the person. But Brad, you can't expect me, of all people, to just not showcase my talent when someone like BJ comes to me and says, "Kellen, I need your sultry tones on a podcast to talk about music." I have to comply, right?
It's fair enough. I've heard of this music thing. I hear it's fun.
Brad, I hope anytime I'm talking to BJ, I'm thinking of you.
Brad wouldn't have any idea what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could see that. So yeah, you're doing a new fun podcast about music.
We are doing a new fun podcast, and that's the interesting thing. We as three white American middle-aged men are talking about music and really adding to the conversation in a way that I don't think white middle-aged men have added to it. You know.
Sure, I do have to say, as far as the originality of three middle-aged white dudes starting a podcast. I couldn't find the Dad Rock podcast in like the first 50 listings when I searched for Dad Rock podcast.
Yeah.
But you'll get there, and it's great.
We will get there. Again, we got to work on it.
And it is great. I listened to it, and it was a lot of fun.
I think it's very fun. It's 30 minutes. It's really quick. I think all of us come from very different elements. Like BJ is obviously coming from the radio side. Joel is very coming from a fan side, and I'm trying to come from like the sort of playing music side to be like, okay, sure, but like, does this work as a piece, right? Does this actually, like, sure, does, what is it? And it's funny because they were like, great, we're going to do Foo Fighters. And I said, perfect. What is the opposite of Foo Fighters? And they didn't have an answer. So I'm like, great, we're talking about Taylor Swift's new song and about her having to re-record a whole album. So I'm going to constantly be pushing the envelope to really make sure that we're not just talking about white guys playing rock and roll. We are, in fact, talking about white women playing rock and roll. So we'll see.
Excellent. Well, I wish you luck in whatever that turns into. It's already way better produced than whatever this is. So.
Well, Brad, again, this is a different situation, right? What we're doing right here is semi-stream of consciousness. This is chaos. It's intended to be chaos, right? BJ, he wants that drive time radio. He wants it going. We don't want segments, right? We're looking for that energy. We're looking for that way to sort of capture something really, really beautiful in a moment,
Sure. Listen, as long as I can keep drinking while we're doing the stream, then that's fine.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't feel comfortable drinking on the Dad Rock podcast. I feel like then it's gonna really go off the rails, and I'm gonna be like, guys, what we really should be talking about. And it's not really,
sure.
Not really.
What could go wrong? Come in.
Yeah. Brad, I think I have a question for you.
Okay, you think you do? I should hope that you have probably a couple.
I had to really adjust a lot of the questions, and again, we've done this a couple weeks, and I've known you for some time. You really nailed it on the head about like, don't ask Brad hypothetical questions, because I have a doc. It's like 2 or 3 pages long. That's nothing but hypothetical questions, and I had to sort of make some adjustments.
That might be fun to do as an episode on its own, to see how long you can stall my brain with a hypothetical question. How take bets in the chat, like how long until Brad starts to function again and can form a thought.
So Brad, I've got some big questions.
Okay.
I was talking to someone very special to me this week, and we were talking about a philosophical question that in my philosophy class we would ask every single time we were there, and it fucks with your head, and I'm curious to hear your answer.
Okay.
We'll get to that eventually.
Perfect.
But right now I'm going to ask you this. Brad, what is the best way for a person to attain happiness? Welcome to the show.
Okay. All right. I mean,
for a person to attain happiness.
Okay. The best way or the more efficient way?
See, there's the thing there, Brad. The best way and the most efficient way would be 2 different things.
Right. So I would say that the best way would be to get lucky when you're bored, so that you have money and you can search for happiness with some comfort. But in sort of more practical terms, most happiness comes from sort of internal sources, right? There's not a lot of input that you can get from things, money, stuff, location, whatever, that can actually guarantee to make you happy. You have to just enjoy the things that you have and where you are and enjoy the journey, so to speak. But definitely a certain amount of money makes it a lot easier to comfortably search for those things that you can find happiness in, without being busy working 4 jobs or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, that's the hard thing, right? We as we as Westerners think that doing or consuming or possessing is the sort of route to sort of having those things. And we think like, oh yeah, you need a good job, you need to have lots and lots of money, oh, you got to travel, you got to do the rest of this. But like reality, if like you're just your little square that you live on, that's all you have, that's all it is. There's the people I know in my life who are the happiest are the people who have the least because they just don't want the distractions, right? These are my friends who like live, if I'm black about a word, like Tim Kaczynski, out in a shack, kind of doing his own thing, and essentially kind of are just barely on the grid, and they just like, this is the life that they live.
That sounds pretty good to me, personally. As long as I can get pizza delivered, I'm good. There's a line of society that I require.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just alone in the woods somewhere, as long as I can get internet and pizza.
That's the thing, is the internet, right? It's like, I don't need stuff, but as long as I have the internet.
I need a connection to information and entertainment. And the internet is the easiest sort of one source for a collection of those things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, happiness is a weird one. I don't remember when it was. It was quite a while ago now. The number's probably different. But there was a study that showed that like up to about $70,000 a year of income, happiness on average increased. Mm-hmm. It wasn't linear because you can find happiness in anything and there's all kinds of variables, but it ramped up generally. And then after 70, it plateaued until about 200,000 or something like that. And then it actually went down for a while. And it's very interesting. It's like the more stuff you have, or the more sort of wealth and comfort that you get, the less happiness you get from those things generally. And everyone's different. And so you need more and more and more and bigger. And soon you're trying to buy islands and stuff just to try to get happy. And that's
the interesting thing about like, when you're poor. Like I remember the first couple of years I lived here in Chicago, I had friends who were making six figures, and I was a poor, out of work actor who was happy to be filing my taxes and be like, oh, I made like $15,000 this year. This is fantastic, right? Okay. You kept thinking like, oh, if I only made just a little bit more money, if I only did this. And then at a certain point, you just have to be like, I don't really think the money is going to give me happiness. The money just gives me flexibility to do more things, right? Yep. It's just like the money kind of unlocks more doors for you, but it doesn't really make you happy.
No. It does, to a degree, let you have the flexibility to find happiness, though, for sure. There's a bar that you sort of have to get across before it's easy to be happy. Mm-hmm. But anyone can be happy with what they got. People are really good at getting used to whatever their situation is and finding happiness.
Yeah. I mean, there is something to be said about most of the like ascetics of the world who are like, nope, I eat rice every day. I have one piece of clothing. I sleep on the floor, and all I do is meditate and be, right? Like those are the most happy people because they've realized, oh, I just have to exist and I can be happy. Yes, but that's Brad. We'll leave the ascetics and how to achieve happiness for maybe another episode where we talk about this whole religion thing.
Sure, we'll hit nirvana eventually.
Yes, we will. But Brad, you did very good on that question. I'm very, very impressed.
I can answer things sometimes. Jeez.
I was expecting you to say a steady supply of DMT and a foot massager, right?
I mean that's the more efficient route.
Exactly.
You asked for the best, and that's why I needed clarification.
Yes, chemically,
just like liquid nutrition drip. And DMT and a really good VR system. Mm-hmm. And a colostomy.
Oh gosh, Brad, that is an interesting question.
And you'd be set.
I don't know if I would want to be on DMT and be in VR. I feel like that would be counterintuitive in terms of my experience. I feel like...
I guess it depends on what you're doing in VR, right? You can create any kind of visual or audio experience you want and kind of craft your trip.
Fascinating.
And it would be very immersive while you're on DMT, I'm sure.
That's too much, right? I feel like it would almost be something where it's like, nope, they got to take the VR set off.
Right, yeah, no, too real. I know it's fake and it's too real. Nope, that's
too
bad.
real. I just want to sit here with the crystal lizard and the time wheel, and I'm fine with this. I don't need VR to distract me. This is enough.
Classic time wheel.
Classic.
Time wheel is good times.
Love when I see the time wheel, I know I'm in the right spot.
It's good. Don't believe what the lizard says though, but the time wheel is good.
Time wheel's going to take you to the right place.
All right. So after that, how about a nice little light one
for
you, Kellen? Kellen, do we have free will?
Oh, Brad. Do we have free will?
And a follow-up, should we care if we have free will?
Should we care? Okay, do we have free will? I guess there's capital free will and then there's lowercase free will, right? We could say that based on, and I'm going to put on my marketing hat right now, right? You could say, Brad, that the concept of free will in today's digital society doesn't really exist because of how easy it is to slowly influence people based on subliminal messages, based on targeted sort of ads. It is very easy to take, because there's so much stuff happening to people, it's very easy to find the right sort of person and get them to do the thing you want them to do, right? It's very, very easy. Now, and again, you could say, and trust me, there's plenty of marketing conferences I've been to where people have talked about and said things like, there's no such thing as free will. You can make anybody do anything. And that's when I say, goodbye, I'm going to go. This is no longer fun. But I do think when we're talking about capital free will, it is pretty hard to define if it is or isn't here, right? And that's where we get into the how do you know you're not just a brain in a jar, right? How do you know what your reality is? You start to kind of break those things down. Golly, Brad. Golly. I believe we have free will. I believe that we have free will because of a couple different things. If we didn't have free will, mistakes wouldn't make sense, right? Like there would almost be something about making a mistake that logically wouldn't really compute, you know? So if we have this concept of you have free will that allows you to make mistakes, that allows you to have successes, wouldn't the concept then of saying if you don't have free will, a mistake would narratively almost not make sense, right? There wouldn't ever be any sort of life-changing, terrible things that would happen to you. You would just be kind of have some small circumstances where you learn some moral lessons and then move on.
I suppose that depends on what you consider the opposite of having free will is. It sounds like you're talking like free will or controlled.
Yes, I guess
two things.
So what to you then is the opposite of free will?
Essentially a functioning system. Would you boil it down to physics?
Oh, okay. So we're talking about...
You can have potential for randomness in physics. Right. So you can have decisions or events that you may not have, quote unquote, wanted.
Yes.
But that's random. It's not like the opposite of free will in the sense that you seem to be talking about. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So at best, in a system based on the rules of physics as we understand it, from my understanding, at least in my opinion, the best you can hope for is random will, which is not nearly as great as considering it free will, because you're still not in control. You're just subject to a system, and your conscious thoughts are at the end of that system, justifying what happened rather than making choices about what is happening.
But wouldn't again, if we're going to follow that logic, sure, what would be the purpose? What would be the biological purpose if we lived in a system of having consciousness? If we really were just systematic, right? Like when we think about insects or animals that live in systems like you're describing, saying, hey, great, this is the system that they live in. They live via sort of instinct. There's no intuition. There's no anything else like that. If we think about that, there's no need for consciousness. The consciousness gets in the way of the system. And to buy
wisdom teeth.
Okay, but I think okay. But wisdom teeth we have to look at wisdom teeth as well as our biology in terms of a timeline, right? Like, yes, wisdom teeth don't make sense to us now because you and I believe we are the final evolution, which we are absolutely not. We are a blip on where we're going, and it takes generations on generations for us to get that way, right? The color of our skin, our eyes, the fact that we're sitting here talking via the internet is a great example of how we have evolved and changed and adapted using tools. It doesn't make any sense if there isn't free will to ever have a consciousness that would allow someone to start asking those questions, to me personally. Sure. So when I think about your point about systems, though, and if we're applying a sort of a physics base, there are still plenty of examples in physics of elements not behaving the way they're supposed to be, right? There are ways in which the observed element, though it should be a certain way, it should be an electron, but the moment we look at the element, it suddenly turns into a neutron, or other sort of examples of seeing how physics is supposed to behave when under observation, and it does the opposite. And yet when we decide to not observe it, it does something else. Like there's a Schrodinger's cat sort of element to it, where it's like we have free will and we don't have free will at the same time.
Sure. Now, are you aware that the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment was to make fun of how poorly the Copenhagen interpretation of physics explains things?
Yes. Yes.
Because that's always fun to talk about physicists about. It's a good time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you to a degree, at least. I guess we sort of differ in the fundamental idea of what we consider the decision-making process part of free will, maybe. Mm-hmm. But that's very interesting.
It's tough, Brad, because I think when I think about free will, I inherently tie it to fate, right? Free will versus fate, and this idea of you are fated to do something, and you could put that fate into your sort of ideology of like in a system, right? If I am within a closed system, the purpose of my myself is to accomplish X, and if I do that, then I no longer have free will. I am doing the thing I'm sent to do. But the moment I decide to change my end goal to Y, then is that free will, or is that a random sort of a fact? Is that a mutation of what I'm supposed to be doing? It gets a little gray right there, right?
Sure. I think of it almost like a slinky in a weird way.
Oh.
So you kick a slinky off the top of the staircase, right? It's just following fairly basic laws of physics.
Yes.
Gravity and friction and momentum, right? But if you throw some weird object in the stairs in the middle somewhere, it's still going to follow its regular system, but it's going to be knocked way off course randomly based on something outside of itself.
Yes.
But it's still following the same rules and the same system.
Sure.
But now its direction has changed.
Mm-hmm. I will say, though, that is not the interesting thing about that, if we're going to go into it, is the slinky does not put itself at the top of the stairs. You have to take the slinky and put it there, and then you have to start the action that way. And that's the interesting thing about it, is it's like, if we're thinking about this slinky, analogy, if we are the slinky, something has to put us there to get us going. There has to be an action that kind of gets us that way. And then the question is, and this is where this is where the philosophy brain really like strips up apart.
Sure.
Well, we might not have free will, but did something that did have free will do this to us? Or it's like systems within systems within systems of we're sort of again, we're a two-dimensional being that doesn't understand that we live in a three-dimensional world, right? We don't understand the ways in which 3D and 4D and 6D are sort of like interacting with us, but we go from point A to point B. We're just this little line, we're a dot, whatever we want to be. And we don't realize that there are, in fact, things that are bumping into us that we can't perceive, that are actually moving us in certain sort of ways. And that's why philosophy is just going to drive me crazy for the rest of my life.
That's fair. But I hit you with one other direction to think about it.
I'm loving this, by the way. Chad's talking about juice. You and me are like, what is free will?
That's great. So you make a decision.
I make a decision.
Right? Mm-hmm. Doesn't really matter what it is. We can measure, like electrically, essentially, with brain activity, the exact moment that you make the decision.
Yes.
Versus when you say you make the decision, etc.
Yes.
And on that timeline, the brain activity seems fairly conclusive. I mean, there's always new studies, who knows? But it seems fairly conclusive right now that the decision is happening before you are consciously making it.
Yes.
And you're essentially justifying a thing that happened in your brain that made that decision. So if that is the case, what non-physical systems-based process is working that allows you to make a decision using your free will? If you making the decision is happening after the brain activity.
I mean, that's okay. All right, let's get into this, right? At a certain point, we have to understand that there's chemistry that's happening in our brain as well as the rest of our body that we as human beings can't really conceive yet, right? We don't see the connective tissue. We're getting closer every single day, but there is this element of the sort of symbiotic relationship between our chemicals in our brain, chemicals in our gut, the chemicals in the air that are sort of influencing us in certain sort of ways that we have to think like, oh, well, if our brain makes this decision, because we as Westerners believe that the brain is the self, rather than thinking about, well, the self exists in many, many different sort of facets, that we have to really allow for, if the chemicals in our brain are doing one thing, that there has to be things that are happening in the rest of our system in terms of our blood, our nervous system, our limbic system, all these different things that are in fact also allowing sort of a decision to be made. And then there is the undefinable self that is the thing that says, I want to take this and put it into action, right?
Sure.
You know, what I think is really interesting about studies like that, Brad, is we're always looking at primates and humans in terms of this decision-making process, but we're not looking at other animals in terms of how quickly that system is going, right? We're not looking at other mammals, or we're not looking at reptiles or birds in terms of like, how do these animals that don't have a consciousness that we're aware of, how are they making those decisions? I would love to see that with a pig. I would love to see if there was a pig in terms of how quickly the brain fired and then they went, yes, I would love to eat that, you know?
That would actually be very cool. And it's getting more and more possible now that Neuralink is testing their brain implants on pigs.
There we go.
So that could get very interesting. I don't think there's nearly enough electrodes in the current version to be helpful there, but
probably
it would be interesting to see those studies for sure.
Yeah. Brad, is there anything else you want to talk about with this, or would you like to move on to our next piece?
I think we can move on. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that. I don't really have like answers to it. It's interesting to talk about.
Right? And then I think for me, again, as a Reformed Catholic, the first day of Lent, talking about free will, it is very difficult for me not to go instantly be like, fucking God, oh, I hate this, right? You know,
it's almost like I did that on purpose.
Oh, you're so good, Brad. You're so good. Brad, you have a small human living in your home, correct?
He's very small. He's getting bigger very rapidly, but yes, currently he is quite small.
This small human that lives in your home is also consuming television, correct?
He is not a ton, more YouTube lately and things like that. And I guess Netflix and things. So yeah, I mean, but programming,
your children,
however you want to define
watches programming, television shows geared towards kids, right?
Sure, yeah.
Yes. Brad, I have a couple of children's shows that I'm a big fan of that I think are problematic for
Okay.
to watch in terms of the larger themes that show is talking about. And what I would like to do is I'm going to read 6 shows to you.
Okay.
And I'm going to see, and again, you live in Canada, you might have different shows. I do know that most of these shows are on Canada, so maybe your kid hasn't seen them, but we'll see. Canada makes excellent children's shows, by the way.
Some of
So
them.
I'm going to read some of these shows to you, and I'm going to see if, based on my description, you can tell what TV show this is. Now, you're going to learn a little bit about me, about what I think children's shows are actually about, and the sort of ways in which we're programming our kids to accept certain things.
Okay.
As well as the logic of a kid show in terms of when you're watching it as an adult, you're like, this is so fucking weird. What are we doing with this show? Okay.
All right. Fair.
Here we go.
Do it.
And if people in the chat also want to add what they think the shows are going to be, that would be fantastic.
Also, just before you get started, yes, Jen, that is the case. There's been a fair number of known examples of people answering questions, looking at individual people, all kinds of stuff for like a couple of minutes after they've been beheaded. It's real weird.
It's very strange. The body is weird.
Yeah.
The body
it's weird. Humans are weird and gross in many ways.
Yes.
Sorry, I just didn't want to let that pass.
Oh, no, it's good. Brad, here's the first question. Not question, but let's see if you can answer this. 100 years after the singularity, sentient robot children interact with the remaining few human beings, acting as their protectors and learning their ways before humans go extinct.
I don't know.
Brad, this is a show called Chuggington, a show about
the trains. Okay, yes. I have seen that. I guess I was not aware of the overarching lore.
Oh, Brad, how is there a world where all these trains are somehow alive? The trains know, and the trains are living, and yet there's also humans. The humans have to live with the trains, but the humans don't have cars or anything else like that. Chuggington, very weird dystopian.
Chuggington is super weird, yeah.
Chuggington. If you've never watched Chuggington and you have kids, watch Chuggington and you will realize, what am I watching? Why are these? How did the train start talking? It's never explained. It's never explained.
Makes no sense.
Okay. An old man's dog finds a war is raging within his home between a hyper-industrial society, a mad king and his family, and a peaceful commune of sex-fueled monsters who bow down to an oracle made of trash.
I mean, that's Fraggle Rock. Right?
That is Fraggle Rock.
Yeah, that's a classic one. That's not even on the air anymore, is it?
Oh, no, it's not.
It's been ages. That was a classic one, though. I haven't seen Fraggle Rock in forever.
Fraggle Rock is such a
my kid has not seen Fraggle Rock, unfortunately. I don't think. I really got to get on that.
Brad, you got to.
I can make that happen.
Fraggle Rock is so, for lack of a better word, sensual to me. Like, it's so clear that Henson is like, nope, the dozers are all of the square people, and then you have the sort of monarchs, and then you got the Fraggles to be like, yeah, man, why aren't we just Fraggles? Why don't we just live like Fraggles?
Right. Fraggle Rock. I have fond memories of Fraggle Rock for sure. I mean, Jim Henson stuff in general is
Jim Henson
great.
Okay. All right, here's the next one. Brett, a child prodigy with a knack for medical ingenuity creates an army of sentient beings via the power of a magical wand given to her by a demon.
I'm sure this is going to be instantly familiar as soon as you say the name, but I can't.
Really familiar. This would be Doc McStuffin.
Of course. Yes.
No one explains how she gets this wand. No one explains why she's creating this army of sentient beings, toys, and animals. It's very strange.
It is super strange. Why has someone given a toddler magical powers to create life?
And it's great.
It's not safe. Toddlers are psychotic. They don't need the power to create life.
They don't need the power to create life. And that's the thing, is that Doc McStuffins is teaching her children that if you make a deal with the demon, it will give you the power to make inanimate objects come to life, and that she gets to heal them and help them. Yeah. Okay. Brad, a lost time machine finds its way to the Paleozoic era, where dinosaurs use it to travel through time on the sexiest form of transportation, a steam train.
Dinosaur train.
Dinosaur train.
That one I'm fairly familiar with, yes. It doesn't make any sense either.
Any sense at all. Makes no sense at all, Brad. I love Dinosaur Train.
It's a great time travel loop, though. Like, sorry, we can't go back to that time yet. We have to go forward first. We have to wait for the loop to.
Wait for the loop.
We're on a train. It's not. Come on, it's a loop.
We're on a train. We can't.
Deal with it. Nonsense.
I love Dinosaur Train. Okay, Brad, you're doing so well. You're doing well so far. A Leviathan and his ward wander the streets of suburban America. The world is too terrified to confront them out of fear they are two of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. This one is such a stretch. I'm sorry.
I don't have any idea.
This would be Clifford the Big Red Dog.
Okay, sure. I wasn't connecting Leviathan with the dog, so it wasn't. But yeah, I got you.
It's a giant red dog. If you saw a giant red dog walking down the street, you would say, I don't know what's going to happen next, but people are going to start disappearing, right? Like it's...
Oh, absolutely. Especially one that started as the runt. You would like, day 3 of like exponential growth, be like, no, something is wrong. We need to kill it with fire and move on.
Yes. All right, Brad, here's the last one. A high-tech focused private military corporation uses genetically altered animals to terrorize a small town, enforcing draconian laws with swift justice. Someone in the chat already said this. Someone in the chat already knew that I was going to talk about this show.
Are you talking about Paw Patrol?
I am talking about Paw Patrol.
Of course.
Paw Patrol is the most suspect show I have ever. I watched Paw Patrol with my son when he was young, and I was like, this show is insane.
That really is. I am convinced that the entire show is an experiment run by an evil AI. It's the only way they can build technology fast enough is some AI is running the manufacturing system that Ryder is using. Ryder is a slave or a robot or something. I don't know. He's not a kid. He is a slave to the AI overlord that runs the tower.
Yes.
It's the only functional way that things could get done at the speed that they do. And they have like telepathic equipment that they bark at, that it does specific tasks without instruction, and it makes no sense. There's no way to do it without some kind of, I don't know, AI or alien or supernatural force controlling those things. And it makes no sense. Also, like, there's like 4 people that live in that whole town.
Yeah,
like
there's 4 people who live in that town.
One of them is the mayor. So really like 3 people.
Right.
But also there's other cities that have talking animals. They go and they help the queen at some point, or royalty.
The whole thing about the queen, the fact that the queen gets her jewels stolen all the time, and then the queen's like, oh, it's fine. It's just insane.
It makes no sense. It's an experiment of some kind. It has to be. There's like 3 cities on the planet, and the AI is just messing with people. Like something very weird is going on. It makes no sense otherwise.
Yes. I am so glad we are on the same page.
Absolutely. Also, it's just the worst. It's the worst show. It's terrible. The people of the town need help with everything.
Everything. I can't open my jar of pickles. I better call the Paw Patrol.
And who's funding them?
Exactly, Brad. Because they've got like these giant trucks and jets, and the fuel that's probably used for all of this. None of it makes sense. And I get it. It's a kid show. We don't ask questions about this, right?
At one point, a meteor comes down and they get superpowers. Fine. If you want superpowered talking animals
Love it.
Great. But before that, it was all like regular technology, except for the dogs could talk for some reason and the cats couldn't. But they were still intelligent. They just couldn't speak. It was weird. Doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make any sense at all. Doesn't make any sense at all that the cats, for some reason, can't talk. It's weird that they also had this whole like spy situation where they finally admitted, yes, these are spies. The animals are here to spy on you, and we're fine with them being spies. We're totally fine with them being spies, right? Oh, boy.
Sense.
Right?
Constant aggravation. I'm very glad. He's escaped Paw Patrol, finally, thankfully.
Yeah.
But for a long time, that was one of the banes of my existence, was Paw Patrol, and trying to understand how that world could possibly function. Because it can't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was fun and horrifying. And I'm very happy that he has escaped all of those things so far.
Yeah.
He's mostly watching Minecraft videos on YouTube these days.
And I will feel the same way. It's like I would much rather have my son watching speedruns than have to sit and watch Paw Patrol. He was also into like Blaze and the Monster Machines. And I couldn't really come up with a thing about Blaze and the Monster Machines besides like a car gets high and becomes sentient. Like I was trying to come up with some way of like, what is Blaze and the Monster Machines? I was like, I don't think there is anything except for like there's one human and a bunch of cars that can talk. So
yeah, he was big into robo trucks, whatever the
robo trucks, yeah,
that kind of thing. But yeah, he's mostly escaped that, thankfully. Let's see, where can we go from there?
Where do we go from there?
Let's see. Oh, here's just a fun, silly question that I saw. If you had a warning label, Kellen, what would it say? I just thought that was a ridiculous question that I had.
If I had a warning label, what would it
if you had a warning label on you, what would it say?
If I had a warning label, what would it say? Caution, very emotional.
Okay, fair enough. I can see that, I guess.
Not a problem. No,
I mean, it doesn't have to be bad. It's just something you need to know about the.
Yeah, caution, very emotional.
I can see that.
It's very funny, Brad. When someone says to me, "It's like, Kellen, you seem so logical," I'm like, "Oh boy, I don't think you know me very well." When I'm the voice of reason in a conversation, that's not a good sign.
See, I am often the voice of reason in a conversation, but not everybody likes it all the time. Mine would probably be, don't ask unless you really want to know.
Yes. Brad, that's so good. Okay. Let's look at this. Brad, what is a life-altering thing every human should ideally get to experience at least once in their lives?
Life-altering thing everyone should get to experience at least.
That could be something that you've had an experience with. That could be something that you've never had and you've wanted to have, but something that really changes someone's life, right? That's the thing that every person should sort of experience that way.
That's tricky because it would probably be different for a lot. Like trying to think of one thing that would be life-changing for everyone.
Well, I would say
I mean, a pile of money would be a classic thing, I guess, but
sure,
it's
but
sort of boring.
The interesting thing about money is if everyone gets it, suddenly it's not as interesting, right?
It's true. Say a live-in babysitter would be a life-changing thing that everyone should experience.
But I mean, that also means that, like, the interesting thing about that would be is, do I experience a live-in babysitter as a baby or as an adult?
Right. You get babysat. That's the life-changing experience. Oh, Anna has an interesting backpack through Europe for a month. That would probably be life-changing. I can see that. I don't know if it would be life-changing for everyone, though. There's lots of
Sure,
people that are already there that are probably like, yeah,
I
it's
get it.
fine, it's great, whatever.
Not a lot of people say, hey, I want to go backpacking through the United States.
It's true.
Yeah.
Seems dangerous these days to do that. It wouldn't even be a very good plan if you did
No,
that.
you could backpack through a city, maybe a region, but yeah. Europe is sort of interesting that way. My parents, a couple years ago, they walked 500 miles across Spain. They walked. My mom is 65 at the time. My dad had just turned 60, and they walked all the way across Spain because they're Catholic. Because that's what Catholics do. Wow. They go on pilgrimage, and they took a month and a half, and they walked every day, walked 20 miles, and they did that, and they loved it. And 2 years later, they went back and they did it again because that's what you do when you like walking and being outside.
You know what?
What?
This might sound slightly odd, but blowing up something in a ridiculous fashion.
Oh, Brad.
There are very few things that changed me as much as the first time that I just got to blow up some shit. It is very cathartic in many, many ways.
Now, Brad, do you think that's a male thing? Is destroying something, is that a male thing? I don't know any women who are like.
I don't think so. I think the chat will probably show that it is not just a male thing. Everyone needs to blow something up now and then. Yeah. Everyone's got something in their life that it would just be really satisfying to just watch just erupt. I'll have to go with that, I think.
It'd be great for the for certain sort of industries. Brad, why not something like a drug or something? We think about mind altering. Why not? Hey, everyone should do LSD. Everyone should do acid. Everyone should do mushrooms. I'm actually extremely impressed that was the first thing you went to, because for me, I was like, everyone should take mushrooms. Everyone should go out to the woods, do mushrooms like at least once a year, and we would all be fine.
Sure, I could see that. The thing that catches me there is I'm very literal. And when you say everyone, to me, a lot of things like drugs become problematic to a certain percentage of people. And so you can't necessarily give everyone a large enough dose of mushrooms to be interesting and have them deal with it well afterwards.
But Brad, this is why it's individuals. We make a cottage industry, right? Where it's like, hey, on your 25th birthday, you come out here to the desert, or you come out here to Saskatchewan into the woods, or you go to certain sort of places.
Just to clarify, I'm pretty sure he meant get mushrooms and then go do them in the woods, not just to go collect random mushrooms without knowing what you're doing, because that could be very bad. I mean, it could also be good depending on where you are and the types of mushrooms, but it's not necessarily the safest way to get your mushrooms.
Don't eat mushrooms that have red dots on them. Don't eat mushrooms that smell like pepper, and don't eat mushrooms that when you touch them, your fingers feel funny. I have absolutely gone out and found chanterelles and done lots and lots of mushroom hunting. And then you sometimes find stuff where you're like, oh, this mushroom looks like it's glowing. I bet if I put this in my mouth, I might start glowing.
Sure. And you might.
Yes.
But it's a risky endeavor to find random mushrooms. It can work in your favor, but I don't think I would suggest it for general.
No. It is much better to have your mushrooms delivered to you than for you to find them in their native sort of state that way. Yeah.
But that would be great for most people, I'm sure. I would be absolutely down for that.
Yes.
It's the literal part of my brain that has trouble. Like,
there's the literal part.
Damn it. There's like some small percentage of people that wouldn't be great for. Yeah.
That is true. That's when we would just have someone do some ayahuasca, right? We'd have them do some ayahuasca.
Maybe like find a drug that would be good for you and take it. It's something that can be individually tailored. I would be absolutely down for that sort of system. And ayahuasca would be fun. Haven't had a chance yet. Let's see. What else do we got that's maybe not quite to the level of free will?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, there's too many silly questions that I have.
I have quite a few silly ones for whatever reason on my list right now. Let's see. Just a nice, quick, easy one. What's your favorite quote from a TV show or movie?
Oh boy. My favorite quote from a TV show or movie. That I'd still laugh at every single time I think about it. It's from the first episode of The Wire, where Bunk is at the crime scene, and it's just him and McNulty just saying "fuck, fuck, fuck" again and again and again. That scene. I mean, I know it's not very quotable, right? Saying "fuck" 30 times, right? But it is so funny to me. It is so hilarious anytime I see that scene. It always makes me laugh. If I had to say something else, it would be Arrested Development, and it's Tobias saying he blew himself. That always makes me. That's
always good.
Always good. Yeah.
Mine would probably be from So I Married an Axe Murderer.
Oh yeah.
And it would be 2 words: therapy. I don't know why that it stuck with me. Ever since the first time I saw that, I was like, that doesn't make any sense, but it makes me laugh every single time. And I can't help it.
Mm-hmm.
That movie is so good.
And that's so funny because it's like when you think about Mike Myers, right? When you think about Myers as a comedian, this is a guy who doesn't need to work. He's already made his money after Wayne's World, right?
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't need to work anymore, right? When you think about So I Married an Axe Murderer, that is such a raw movie. It's so different. It's so timely. It still holds up so well. His performance in that movie is so sweet and nice. It's a really, really good movie.
Really is. It's odd to see it. Like, his character is sort of silly in that movie, but he's essentially playing the straight man to most of the jokes in that movie, which is weird.
So weird to see him have to play the straight man, and then again he starts doing the Eddie Murphy where he's playing all the different characters, which is so funny. But it's like that is such a fun role for him because he gets to play the straight man. Because there's no other movie where he really gets to do that. He is such a fop in the rest of his films.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's fun. This is just a quick, easy one. I can give you more quick, silly ones if you want.
Let's do a couple of quick ones, and then I'll give you this big one, and we'll talk about that for a little bit.
All right. Favorite joke or best joke?
Absolutely, Brad. Here we go. This is so easy, Brad. Brad.
Excellent.
This is for everyone. Okay. Brad, a polar bear walks into a bar.
Okay.
Walks up to the bartender and says, "Excuse me, I would like a gin and tonic." Bartender's a little confused. Says, "I'm sorry, Mr. Polar Bear. Can you say that again? I don't think I heard you over the music." Polar Bear says, "Absolutely. Excuse me. I'd like a gin and tonic." The bartender is extremely confused. Says, "I'm sorry, but why the big pause?" And he says, "I don't know. I guess I've always had them."
Classic. Yeah.
That
absolute classic. Good times.
Joke. I love telling that joke at a party. I love telling a joke at that party because of that pause. That pause is I will do that pause for like a minute.
Right.
If I can get away with it. It's
sure. The longer you go, the funnier it is. So
it's so good. It's so good. You saw it coming. You're like,
okay. I've definitely heard that one before. It's a classic one.
It's a classic.
Mine's probably already probably pretty familiar to you. It's a classic one. It was just really short. What do you call 1,000 lawyers up to their neck in sand?
What do you call 1,000 lawyers up to their neck in sand? I don't know, Brad.
Not enough sand.
That's a good one, Brad. That's a very good one.
Just quick and simple.
Very simple.
I think the first time I heard that was from movie Pool Hall Sharks or Pool Hall Junkies.
Well, junkies. Okay. Yeah. Anna says it's the eye contact with the camera.
Oh, right.
That joke for me. Yeah, that's what gets it.
Is.
And I love that joke if I'm at a party and I will just stare. I will tell the joke. I will do the joke to one person and then I stare at somebody else, and it's just so good, so good. One of these days, Brad, I will have to get my Milton Berle joke book out.
Oh boy,
that's a classic. There's a lot of bad jokes in that. There's a lot of jokes that should be crossed out and never said again.
Right. That is no longer a joke. That's not allowed anymore. Nope.
In 1940, this was barely a joke.
Things from back then haven't all aged so great.
So great. That's so great. Yeah. You got another short one for us?
Sure. Just another quick one here. When you wake up in the morning, if you set an alarm, do you use the snooze button or do you just get your ass out of bed?
Get my ass out of bed.
Excellent. Me too. I don't understand people that use the snooze button, Kellen. It drives me insane. You could have had more sleep if you just set your alarm to the latest time and then got your ass up.
There you go. Right? I actually don't even use an alarm anymore. Like my brain just sort of wakes up. It also helps that I have a baby who lives in the same room as me.
Sure. I mean, that's sort of a living alarm clock in many ways.
Yeah. A living alarm clock is fun. But yeah, it just wakes up. It just sort of happens that way.
Nice. I wish I could do that.
I don't understand the snooze button at all.
I don't understand it. My wife will hit the snooze button like 15 times if she could. I don't understand it at all.
Yeah. I got a quick one for you, Brad.
Sure.
Brad, you're done with the shower. You've just taken a shower.
Okay.
Water's off. Do you dry off in the shower, or do you get out of the shower and dry off?
I will dry my hair at least a little bit in the shower and then get out and dry the rest of me, because otherwise I have a lot of hair and it will make a very large puddle if I get out of the shower without doing that.
But that's the point. You're in the shower for the water to be there. You're getting out of the shower and now there's water out of the shower where you don't want water.
Exactly. Yeah.
I used to make a point of this. I used to say, like, only psychopaths dry themselves outside of the shower. And I have realized that I am, in fact, probably the psychopath, because I ask people that question and everyone's like, no, you get out of the shower and you get yourself dried off. And I'm like, I just don't understand how that's possible. I just don't understand it.
Yeah. I'll dry my hair somewhat, and then by then I've stopped dripping and I step out of the shower and finish. But yeah.
Well, Brad, let's have a conversation about our shower. All right,
okay.
What's your shower routine? What's the first thing you do when you get in the shower?
Wet and soak my hair.
Soak the hair. Okay.
Yeah. Get shampoo in the hair because it takes a while.
A lot of shampoo.
And then wash the rest of me and then rinse out the shampoo. And I don't do any sort of repeat shampoo business. One and done.
Shampoo. What you do the shampoo twice? This is a thing?
A lot of people do. Literally, it's on most shampoo bottles. I don't know why. A lot of people do.
Oh my gosh. I did not know about that. But I only wash my hair like once a week. So there we go.
Sure.
So you get this. This is how this happens. I'm getting a haircut tomorrow finally because it's just too.
Why would you do that? It's glorious. You're going to get complaints next week when people see your haircut.
It's still going to be glorious, but like the fact that it's sort of like it's out here at this point. This is where I'm struggling, right? When
we got a repeater. We got a repeater. It's a thing that exists. Anna too is same thing. I don't understand. I mean, I've never had an issue, and I have a lot of hair. And I don't know. I don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's because I'm a lazy ass, but
no, Brad, you were far from lazy. All right, Brad. Here's my question for you. Here's my big philosophical question for you.
The big one. Okay.
Okay, Brad. Tomorrow, you wake up, and only one thing from your current life remains. Everything else is gone.
Wow. Okay.
What is the one thing that remains?
Oof. When you say thing, we're talking like physical possessions?
I don't know. It can be anything. That's the interesting thing is I think we automatically go to a physical possession, right? It could be a relationship. It could be memories. It could be an experience that you wanted to still have. It is anything, right?
Okay.
Right?
I mean, I would have to say like the wife and kid, the family.
Family. You keep the family.
Keep the
Now,
family. The only thing connecting me to humanity at this point.
Yeah.
Without it, I would go unhinged, I am sure.
Now, Brad, the hard thing is my philosophy teacher would say, family doesn't count. Family's multiple things, right?
Okay, you said relationships, so okay.
Yes, but it's one relationship. It's
okay,
one
I mean, it would have to be the kid then. Yeah.
Have to be the kid, right? It's so tough, right? And like the thing about that question is you ask that question, and I know I would say when I was younger, I would say, oh, I would want to have an object, or I'd want to have like this friendship, or I'd want to have this. And at a certain point, I started even almost questioning, being like, maybe I would rather just have the memory, right? If I could have all my memory, right? And I remembered my family, I remembered all my friends, all of that. Would that be enough to be okay if I couldn't have any of it, right? And you start to kind of get in your head about that, like, well, what is one thing going to be enough to keep me myself? Or do I even look at this and say, is this an opportunity for me to say, well, I let go of all the things, I keep this one thing, and then that is this new sort of metamorphosis of myself. Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. And again, to be in a class, and every single week we start the class with that question, and everyone has to answer that question.
Yikes.
Yeah.
That would be nerve-wracking.
This is what a philosophy degree does. It messes with your brain. Right?
If you weren't a tortured soul before, you will be.
If nobody gets into philosophy if they aren't already tortured. They just want to do it in public and pay for it, right? That's what I am. People in the chat are not enjoying that question. I'm not going to say I'm sorry.
A lot of philosophical questions like that are not meant to make you happy with your decisions.
They're absolutely not supposed to make you happy, right? Like like define love. What is the difference between good and evil? There's all these sort of big questions you have to sort of ask yourself. It's like, all right, well, what is reality? Where you're like, oh my god,
You've given Jen a panic attack.
Very bad, Jen. I'm very, very sorry.
Terrible.
Here's the best part of it. It won't happen. That's the best part about a philosophy.
It seems unlikely. Yeah.
It seems extremely unlikely that you could lose every aspect of your life tomorrow, and then you get to choose which one. Right?
That's a very strange situation.
Right? Like that's like the terrible philosophy question of, all right, tomorrow a man shows up at your door and gives you a briefcase with $1 million and says, you take this briefcase, someone dies in the world, right? Do you take the money?
I wouldn't.
Right? You have to say it's like, all right, for $1 million, am I willing? Not, I don't kill them, but am I willing to say that a life, it could be any life in the world, is erased so that I can get $1 million, right? It's just, these are the sort of questions where you're like, well, there's no fun. There's no enjoyment of this. It's bad.
All right, my next thing, I need to grab a picture for that apparently I didn't save to the right spot. So I will do that now here.
Brad is grabbing a picture for us. Brad, I just asked Google questions to, and this came up with questions to, deep questions to ask on a date. I'm going to see. Brad, what is something that never ends well?
Something that never ends.
That never ends well. Brad, what's something that never ends well?
Never. Again, with the absolutes, I'm a literalist. Something that never ends well.
Never ends well.
I mean, so far, human societies.
That's not.
Sorry, did I fail the question?
Oh boy.
I can't. Then again, I can't say never because, like, there's lots of time left. Maybe one will eventually.
Oh my gosh.
All right, I think I got these pictures.
You got these pictures ready for us? Okay.
All right, so one of these pictures, you might recognize both, but
oh dear.
Do you know who this person is?
Colin Hanks. Yeah, I knew Colin Hanks. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Now, do you know who this person is?
That's Tom Hanks's other son, I believe. Yes.
Sure. Do you know what his name is?
He's got a bad name, right? He's got like a bad, weird rap name.
Now, it's funny that you say that because his name is Chet. Chet Hanks. And I was bringing that up because have you heard of the term nominative determinism?
I don't think I have.
Which is essentially like the thing where you see somebody named Candy or whatever, and you think like, oh, that's a stripper name.
Yes.
Or you hear some Chet, oh, that's like a gangster kind of thing, or like a super snooty like ascot guy, depending on your perspective.
When I hear the name Chet, I think about a bully.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So it's sort of like do names actually affect someone's personality, someone's life?
Oh yeah.
That kind of thing. And I just thought that was a very interesting concept because there's a lot of weird examples of it seeming to be true.
Absolutely, Brad. Absolutely. I actually think I feel very blessed in terms of having a name like Kellen, right? I feel like people hear my name and they're like, oh, I don't think I know a Kellen. This is interesting. But it's also not such a strange sort of name that people are like, what country are you from? Right?
Right.
It's recognizable enough as sort of an Irish American that I think it's easy to sort of understand that aspect of it. But I totally agree. I will hear a name and I will be like, nope, I know exactly what this person is based on that name.
Right? Isn't that weird? Why?
It is weird.
Why is that a thing?
Brad, I have a child named Dennis and I have a child named Oscar. Do you think I hadn't thought about this in terms of the names that I'm giving them? That is like, what are people going to think these children are? And Dennis is a blonde, tow-headed kid who loves getting into trouble, right?
Sure. Like, he's a menace. Is Oscar a grouch? Is that what you're saying?
So far, yes.
So far,
he's not talking to me. That's all I can tell you. He's a real grouch.
Giving you the cold shoulder, not even talking to you. Jeez.
He seems to enjoy shitting himself, and he lives in a trash can. So,
I mean,
my choice.
What can you do? Yeah, I don't know. I just thought that was a really weird thing. I had to bring it up.
That is a weird thing, Brad. That is. I'm not.
I don't know. I don't understand why that's a thing. Like psychologically, eventually, if people hear, there's a lot of cognitive bias. You meet one person with a certain name and you get biased towards it or whatever. So like I could see over time, like at an individual level, that someone would think a name would be associated with some personality trait or something. But I don't understand how it happens in such a wide spectrum through society. It doesn't seem like there would be a mechanism that would cause that I have understood anyway. I don't know. It's just weird.
Brad, let me ask you this question.
Okay.
How important is freedom of speech to a healthy society?
Very, very important.
Very important, right? It's just like it. It's like, no, it's essential. It's essential to a healthy society is freedom of speech.
Absolutely.
Right? Yes. There we go. Easy. Done.
Easiest quiz ever.
It's done. Brad, here's my next question for you. Do you believe in let's roll the camera back. Do you believe that animals that we should respect animals the way that we respect other human beings in terms of understanding that a human has consciousness, and consciousness it means that we need to not harm them? Let's talk about ethical implications of animals.
Sure. I would say at least to a degree. There's definitely a lot of gray area there, in my opinion. Anyway, people would disagree with that possibly, especially vegans. But there's some gray area in there, I think, personally. Yeah. But sometimes
it's tough, right? Because you think about what you were talking about before about like the neurons are firing. And are we considering that decision making in terms of how the neurons are firing? Are we considering that consciousness, or is it the sort of the larger ability to compute and create language and deal with things that make consciousness important to us? You know,
that's very tricky.
Yeah,
and a question that is problematic to me in that I'll definitely be eating a cheeseburger later. So. But yeah, I mean, kind of sometimes. I don't know. It's weird. Consciousness and those kinds of decisions are very strange and aggravating to me in many ways.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons I tend to default to having a lot of Soylent. It negates a lot of that decision-making process. I don't super worry about the consciousness of like algae proteins.
Well, and I guess that's the hard thing about it too. It's like if I'm going to go down the road, and I'll admit I was a vegan for a few years, and I was insufferable. I was an absolutely insufferable vegan because I was dating a person who was also an insufferable vegan, and I felt like I needed to be insufferable for them to be interested in me. It was not the best time for me. But as a vegan, I felt like I could argue with anybody to say, well, it is better to be eating like animals. I mean, excuse me, it's better to eat plants because at least even if a plant does have consciousness, that the plant there's still a relationship between the plant wanting to be eaten, right? Like an apple wants to be consumed. That's the reason why the fruit is there, right? Like the apple intentionally is making its ovary large and filled with sugar so that it will be consumed, so that it can be taken someplace and then put someplace else. But you can't say that a cow is intentionally delicious so that it will be consumed, right? It's counterintuitive for the cow to be so tasty, right? That's when you see animals that aren't tasty. It's like, that's a smart animal, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
We need some of those cows from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That'll just be
God.
like, yo, eat me. Like, great, like meat right up in here. This is good stuff here. We can just slice them off. It's great. That would be really handy. Or lab-grown meat. I mean, we're getting there. It's not there yet, but it's
slowly but surely.
That direction of thing anyway. Like, I don't know if that will end up being the thing.
It's still not good for you, right? The same thing that people like talk about, like the Impossible Burger. It's like you're still eating like food that is processed, and sure, it's healthier than eating fast food, but like we're not talking about a healthy choice, right? There are so many better things that are less expensive, less impactful on the environment, better for the economy that you could be eating that are ultimately going to be much, much healthier for you. So,
sure, it's a weird thing to separate, like veganism, vegetarianism. For the most part, if you live in a place where you can access proper stuff, is healthier generally. Not everywhere necessarily, or sometimes it's just massively expensive to eat healthy, and be a vegan. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, it's healthier than eating meat. But like lab-grown meat, you get the ethical benefits, but you don't necessarily get the health. It's like a weirder balance. I don't know. Strange. But I mean, the lab-grown stuff seems like it's going into an interesting direction. Maybe it'll eventually be decent enough, but it's weird right now.
It is a little weird right now. It is a little weird. Brad, we've got about 15 minutes. You got something for us?
Let's see. Oh, here we go. What was the last thing you read, Kellen? Like last book that you...
The last book that I read, I actually finished this up yesterday. I read Foucault's A History of Sexuality, which really brings a lot of stuff about, like, again, the larger concept of our postmodern ideology about sexuality as less about the body, is less about reproduction, and much more about consumption and ownership. It's a lot of, like, you know, as I've said many times before, everything is about sex except for sex. Sex is about power, right? And that's
Absolutely.
what I'm really kind of getting into with this. It's, I mean, in a much more, you know, French sort of way. It's a really, if you've never read any Foucault, I think he's really good about asking philosophical questions without seeming erudite or boring. And I thought this was actually a very fun book to be reading, just to be thinking about. He kind of starts in terms of like 16th century ideology about sex, where it's like you almost have this sort of like little mini enlightenment about sex that happens in the sort of 16th century that, like, you see specifically happening with Moliere and Shakespeare, and it's fun to talk about sex, right? It's really exciting to talk about sex, you know, because it's, you know, people
it's a good time, yeah, absolutely.
It's great, you know, we can do this. It's not as scary that way. There's the new world. There's new sexually transmitted diseases coming from the new world. It's great.
So much fun.
It's so much fun. Have you heard of this herpes thing? It's great. And I mean,
everyone has it by now. It's fine.
Everyone's got it. We're all good. It's not that bad. But he starts there in terms of like noticing. It's like, all right, cool. You have this sexual peak. Then you have the Victorians who come in. Then you have the Edwardians, and then again, there's these sort of these cycles of sexual renaissance that begins to happen within Western society. And it's so interesting just looking at him as a Westerner talking about French society and truly believing that he is the epitome of sex and the epitome of what it means to be a gay man in, you know, the middle of the end of the 20th century. It is a fascinating read. And again, this is part one, so it's really just more of a primer for his larger ideology about sex and pain and everything else. And it's a fast read. It'd probably take you a couple days to read it. And it is a good book, I think, just to kind of get in your head as I think living in the 21st century and just how prevalent sex is. I don't think Foucault could ever imagine what the internet would do and just how numb we are to sex. Because he's talking about this in terms of like, oh, like how Frank Sinatra's talking about having sex with people, right? And he's thinking that this is the epitome of sex. And then you're like, we went to the fucking moon, man. You have no idea where this is going to go.
Have you seen a furry pile? Right? Things are crazy now.
They're crazy, right? Have you been to a leather convention? Come on, man. Let's get into this.
Right.
But I also think Foucault is such an interesting person because he's a gay man who's writing from a place of defensiveness. He's French, so of course he's arrogant, and it's I don't know, man. I think it's really interesting to read pieces of history this way and read it like a history, right? I'm not reading it to enlighten myself today. I'm reading it to say, what was it like then? To allow myself to say, boy, look at where we are now, right? It's the same reason I think it's interesting to kind of read any sort of book that's sort of putting a flagpole down saying, this is where we are. And then you read it 10 years later and you're like, boy, this person was so fucking wrong. So,
right. Well, that sounds very interesting. I'm going to have to put it on my list.
It's great. It's absolutely great. And the book I was rereading, and again, like I've got some people here who are going to be reading this book with me, Attached, The New Science of Adult Attachment, How It Can Help You Find and Keep Love, just to kind of refamiliarize myself with good old attachment theory.
Sure. That one I have read, although it's been a little while.
Yeah, that's a good book. I think it's actually it was good. I read it probably 5 years ago, and it was really eye-opening, and it made me feel a lot better because I felt like when I read that book the first time, I was much more in the anxious attachment, and now I feel a little bit more on the secure side. You strike me as someone who's very secure, Brad. You strike me as very, very secure attachment style.
Yeah, pretty much.
Pretty much.
Near ambivalent level of security.
Yeah, that is good, Brad. That is good.
Technically, that is good most of the time.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Most of the time.
There's exceptions.
Yeah.
The last thing I read is much sillier.
What did you read last?
I read, well, it's a whole series, but the first one is called Off to Be the Wizard by Scott Meyer.
Oh.
Yeah, Scott Meyer. Essentially, it's like a gamer nerd matrix book.
Oh,
someone finds a file on a server for like some game company.
Uh-huh.
Notices that his name is listed in the file and starts tweaking the variables and realizes that they're at a simulation and you could just mess with this file and there's all kinds of stuff in it, all for everyone, for every object in the world. There's like references to it. It's essentially programmer matrix stuff. And so he very instantly starts doing all kinds of weird things and instantly gets in massive trouble because he's just causing all kinds of chaos and creating money in his bank account magically. And like the feds are after him because they're trying to explain what's going on. And so he escapes to the past and pretends to be a wizard with his magical powers and his smartphone. And it's just all sorts of ramifications of that and sort of exploring how that would go down, and meets all kinds of people and some people that have also found the file and things. It actually is a very interesting series that's very sort of breezy to read and has a lot of interesting ideas about like what would happen if a small group of people just literally started gaining the ability to mess with reality at whim. It's a lot of fun. And it's funny. Like it's sort of leans heavily towards the comedy value.
Oh, yeah, you would have to, because if not, then it would take itself too seriously and it would be very cringe.
It would be super depressing, or it would just be weird. But yeah, it's very silly and fun.
That's great, Brad. I might have to take a look at that. That actually sounds very, very fun to read right now.
Yeah, I think there are 5 books currently in the series. It's a pretty good time.
Okay, Brad. Let's see. I think I have another quick one.
Yes.
Club. All right, Brad. Oh gosh, these are all terrible. Again, Brad, I had this big list of all these hypothetical questions for you. I'm like, these aren't going to work, especially at this point.
I can't guarantee that my brain will start working before the end of the stream.
Brad, here's a question for you. What do you think your worst trait is? Do you have a trait or a character flaw that you're not particularly proud of?
I'm the embodiment of that meme in an interview where they're like, "What's your worst quality?" And they're like, "I'm too honest." I'm like, "That's not a quality. I don't care what you think." Like that's. But no, I mean, probably my apathy about most things.
Yeah,
a lot of people would be annoyed at the level that I don't care about most of the things that a lot of people care about, at least to the level, anywhere near the level that they do.
That's the thing, Brad. I don't even know if I would consider you apathetic. I think you just have a very, very good compass to what is actually worth caring about, right? I think you're very, very good at being like, no, I don't think this is a thing. So because to me, when I see you care about something, I'm like, okay, this is it's like oh, Brad found the vein. When you're like, actually, guys, I think it should be this one. We're like, we need to shut the fuck up and listen to this guy, because if he's telling us how he feels.
I do kind of get that when I finally talk about something. People are like, wait, what are you talking about? I'm like,
yeah.
But I don't know if I like that very much, but it does happen a lot.
It does happen. Well, I mean, that's just you, Brad. Like, you just gotta, you're gonna be, you're quiet, and you finally speak up. You say, hey, this is the thing. And if people aren't willing to hear that, then that's on them. So
yeah. So I don't like worst quality. I don't know other than that. I'm not great at like social things without being drunk. So that's in person anyway. Like on the internet is a little easier because if things get too weird, I can just be like, okay, click, I'm out. It's a lot easier than out in the world, but yeah, I don't function very well in person in crowds.
Yeah. So COVID has been good for you.
It's really awkward, Kellen. Listen, it's been kind of great in a lot of ways for me. I get that it's bad. Like it's not, I'm not saying it's good. But for me personally, my level of stress has been greatly reduced by no contact deliveries and everything delivering. It's been pretty good. No social engagement out in the world. It's been handy. It's been annoying like maybe 3 times when I actually like wanted to go out in the world and do something.
Yeah.
But most of the time, it's awkwardly been really good.
Yeah. You're not happy that COVID is killing millions of people.
No, that's bad. I get it. I'm not like that psychopathic. But my personal experience has unfortunately improved with the downfall of modern society.
Yeah. I mean, you say it's a downfall. To me, I think it's just like, great, we're resetting the deck. Let's try and figure some things out.
Sure. Temporary. Let's say temporary downfall. It's a problem for a lot of people. Yeah. It's not great.
No.
But personally I've enjoyed large aspects of it, which is awkward.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Brad, do you have one last question for us before we go?
One last question. Let's see. Since we were talking about books, who's your favorite author?
Murakami is my favorite author. Haruki Murakami is a Japanese, I guess you could say, some sort of say he's a surrealist. I don't think he's necessarily a surrealist. He's more sort of a magic realism. He sort of writes novels about the sort of steps in between people's lives. He writes in the beginning. He started writing these novels that were like, all right, I'm gonna take a noir detective story, and I'm going to set it in a world that doesn't necessarily make sense, that this is where a noir would happen, and I'm going to make it as a person who's sort of like thrown into it. And then we're going to flip the whole world, and we're going to realize, well, what the hell is going on here? It's very poetic. It's wonderful. I look up because I've got all of his work on my shelf, and the first book of his that I read, A Wild Sheep Chase, I read when I first moved here to Chicago, and I just fell in love with his prose is great. The translation is wonderful, and he writes really great books about music. He has a really fantastic novel that I recommended to someone called What I Talk About When I Talk About Running, which is all about him as a long distance runner, and it's just so wonderful to hear him kind of talk about things. And he's absolutely fascinating sort of person. His stuff is not easy to get into, though. I think a lot of people read his stuff, and he will spend 2 chapters writing about the feel of someone sitting in a chair, right? He really likes to sort of embellish in certain sort of types of writing. He writes a lot about people's dreams, and a lot, same thing with Garcia Marquez. Magic realism is, you kind of have to like give yourself into it to say, we're still working within a world. Right. There are magical elements to it, right? We're not talking fantasy, right? This is still a completely understood, realistic world. But yeah, suddenly a frog shows up at your door and starts talking to you, and you as the character are never going to say, what the hell's going on? You're like, yes, of course the frog's here. Of course the frog's here, telling me that Tokyo is going to get bombed. Right. Well, I'm trying to make food. I'm trying to listen. And do I listen to the frog, or I do that? I love of his work. He's great.
That sounds very interesting. I don't think I've read anything by him.
Oh, Brad, I will send you some. I'll send you a couple of his books, and I think you would really enjoy them. They're very. If you like it, they're quick. They just go so quick. He writes like 500-page novels, and they just just to digest them.
Excellent.
What about you, Brad? Who's your favorite author?
Probably Douglas Adams, but
Oh.
for a very specific reason,
Mhm.
is that I am very bad at metaphors,
Oh.
understanding them and explaining them. And Douglas Adams essentially was my training for trying to understand the concept of metaphors and how to use them when I was a kid. Because he writes just ridiculous nonsense metaphors that don't make any sense.
No.
But it helped me separate like how metaphors actually function. And it was very helpful as a kid when I didn't know what the hell people were talking about because I couldn't process like what they could possibly mean by metaphors. That was just such great nonsense. Like one of my favorites is like, it hung in the air exactly the same way a brick doesn't. Like what does that mean?
Yeah, there is something about Adams that is so so droll, right? Like his writing is just it's so of a time and of a place, and I there is something about needing to go back and read Hitchhikers that is so good that is just totally worth.
I read the whole series every couple of years. Yeah,
so good, so good,
and the Dirk Gently stuff too, because they're
great. Yeah. Well, Brad, this has been, as always, just marvelous. Thank you for talking this evening.
It's been great. Thank you. It's always a good time. I can't wait to try to understand all the hypothetical nonsense that you're going to throw at me at some point.
We will have a time where we get into the hypothetical. Again, one of these days, Brad, we will get in that time machine. I'm still trying to unlock. There's some stuff
fun.
so close to unlocking, and if I can find some of this stuff, if I can find some of these old sketches that I've done, if I can find some of these old super embarrassing videos, I will be so happy. But maybe, Brad, maybe this is just you and me, you taking me down your road, and
I found so much stuff. I found an old webcomic that I wrote about the Matrix Online video game when it was in beta. I found home videos that it's horrifying but hilarious.
What you showed me, Brad, I'm very excited.
So many things. It's going to be horrifying and wonderful. It'll be great. Yeah. But this is good. This is great. See you next week for whatever we do then. Who knows?
And if anyone's still here and they haven't already, like, subscribe, comment.
Do the things. Do the YouTube things. You get it.
You get it. Come on. If you're still here and you haven't done that, come on. What are you doing?
Exactly. All right. See you next time.